25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Can you imagine? You're 17 years old, and you get a job at the White House.
Yeah, isn't that something? Wow.
It happened to our next guest, and it happened during the Watergate years.
Yep,
Under the Nixon administration. Donald M. Stinson is who I'm referring to. He has written a book about his experiences at the White House. It is called Downstairs at the White House, a story of a teenager, an Oval Office, and a ringside seat to Watergate. Oh, my gosh.
That's amazing.
Donald is an accomplished journalist. He worked with newspapers in Russia, Slovakia, and Poland. He established a free press. Helped her anyway. He was held hostage in a smelting plant.
I love that story.
Oh my gosh! He slept in an insane asylum.
Yeah.
Well, I've done that.
But it was guarded by sheep.
It was guarded by sheep. Okay, I haven't done that, and I haven't really slept in. I was being silly. Let's see. He was fighting a goat. Defending a lavatory. Oh my gosh!
Door on a Russian airliner.
I hear you. Yeah.
So I guess the goats had free reign, right, with the passengers.
Oh, we got to find out. Donald, I'm glad you're on the phone because I'm lost. Donald Stinson, it's an honor to have you on our show. Good morning, sir.
The pleasure is mine. Thanks so much for having me on today.
This is a fun story to share with all of us.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed writing it, and to my absolute amazement, it has become an Amazon bestseller in political humor.
Absolutely.
So,
yes.
I hope that people enjoy it. You know, I have lived sort of a Forrest Gump kind of life.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah.
Which you know, I've been around lots of different kinds of things that were oddities, and obviously including the Watergate and the Nixon resignation when I was a kid. But you know, I have to go back and I blame all of this on my father. And my dad gave me wonderful advice. And one of the things that he told me right before I got ready to go to college was he said, "Don, remember one thing." He said, "They can't eat you."
Yeah, but they can feed you to the worms.
That's right. And, you know, I mean, what he meant was, obviously, you know, go up and introduce yourself to people. You know, ask questions, do all sorts of things, because at the end, you might aggravate them. They might even fire you, but they can't eat you. And so,
interesting.
You know, I ended up in a program that allowed me to go from my junior year of high school into college at American University in 1972. And, you know, back in those days, you guys are not as old as I am. I'm getting really decrepit. But
I don't know about that. I think we're up there, too.
Well, someone reminded me the other day that I am one of the few people left who's not senile who remembers the Nixon administration. That put me in Washington at a very young age, and I was looking for a job because you could kind of put yourself through college. And just through a series of oddities, I ended up with a job that a guy wanted to give up that was in this weird place called the Old Executive Office Building, and I had no idea what that was. I went down, I interviewed, I got the job, and it took a couple of days, believe it or not, I mean, this is how dumb I was, to realize I was actually working in the White House complex.
Oh my gosh!
Because
wow.
the Old Executive Office Building is actually, which is adjacent to the White House proper, is really where most of the staff offices are. I worked for an assistant to the president for international economic affairs, which was just. I mean, I knew nothing about it, but it all looked.
I was wondering about that. I mean, at 17, were you kind of oblivious to what the job you were doing was doing? I mean, were you oblivious to that? Not your specific job. I'm guessing you knew what you were doing. But, I mean, did you, like, the overall impact of the operation you were part of?
Well, you know, first, Larry, the idea that I may not have known what I'm doing is something that's carried through my entire life. So that wouldn't have been a...
Me too.
But, well, you know, first of all, I mean, the job that I had, I was a clerk and I was a messenger. And then I went to work for Vice President Agnew and worked on reading mail and responding to it, which is an experience all on its own. And then ended up going to the department, what was then called Health, Education, and Welfare, where I had to quit in order to get paid, which is something that government employees would understand.
That's crazy.
It's really weird. And then I ended up back in the White House, and I worked for Mrs. Nixon's press secretary and as a messenger I'm not even sure that they have those folks anymore these days. But I was a student. I was a political science and a history student, and so I knew what was going on. I, like everybody else, couldn't wait to get my hands on the Washington Post and the Washington Star every day to see what was going on. In many cases, as time wore on, these were events that were being reported on that were happening that may have happened 20 feet away from where I was at given points.
Were you at the mercy of whoever was in office at the time? In other words, when Nixon was decided to resign, did you lose your job?
No. I lost my job when Agnew resigned, but the Nixon administration made a commitment to find all of us jobs, and that's how I ended up at Health, Education, and Welfare. But no, I didn't. I was not civil service. I have to paint a little background for you. I stumbled into this. I ended up as a political appointee, but I had no connection with anyone there politically at all. That's just a slot that they could put me in. So I could be easily fired. I'm just lucky that I wasn't. Even odder than all of that, I actually had a top secret security clearance before I was old enough to vote.
Wow.
I would imagine you would need that. Now, I have a double question in one. Did you have a political position of your own, and did you need a political position in order to do your job?
I was very young. I think I had a.
I don't think I had a position at 17.
Not really. Nor did you need one. I mean, I was doing. I was not doing political work. I mean, I was delivering mail. And loitering outside the Oval Office, literally, as much as I could, and getting in trouble because I was a teenager and I did all the kind of stupid things that teenagers did. I just happened to do them on a much bigger stage.
Oh my gosh! So did your photo show up like in Life magazine or anything like that?
Actually, there's a funny little part of the book about some photos that I kept getting cropped out of. Particularly, there must have been an AP photographer, Associated Press, who they must have looked at me and said, "Just crop this guy out." But I have other photos, the ones that were actually taken, but not the ones that ever appeared. So
you relay also historical events. You relay events that happened because of Al Capone, because of Pearl Harbor, even the JFK assassination. That was very fascinating to me. It's funny. One of the things as somebody who has always been interested in history is that working there, you were walking in the steps of greatness. One of the offices that was when I was working for the assistant to the president. One of the offices that was used was in an entryway where the Japanese emissaries had come to meet with Cordell Hull, Secretary of State, to talk about their hope for peace on December 7th, 1941, while the Japanese were bombing Pearl Harbor. Winston Churchill walked those corridors when he came to the United States and stayed in the White House for quite a while. Eisenhower, MacArthur, it's a wide range, and I talk about that because you could feel it, and of course in the White House as well, you could feel the history, but It was a lot of fun. There were also very poignant moments. I went from, at one point, spilling ice water on Frank Sinatra, but living to talk about it.
Oh my God!
And he was as nice. In fact, what happened was that the Nixons were very kind, as were the Fords were, and they liked to help the White House staff take advantage of things that happened in the White House. And so we sometimes got to go to dress rehearsals for state dinners. And the Prime Minister of Italy, who I also had a run-in, there's a story about me and in a restroom outside the Oval Office, which is a really bad, embarrassing story. We got to go and listen to Sinatra rehearse, and he sang, I'll never forget it as long as I live, he sang Old Man River.
And if you've never heard that, sung by Sinatra, I highly recommend it. I could literally feel the floor in the East Room shake, vibrate from his voice. And I ended up, again, my dad's advice, about, they can't eat you. I was about 10 or 15 feet away. And when he got done, he asked somebody in his entourage for some water, and I was faster and dumber, and I got up there, I grabbed the water, I grabbed a glass, we sat on the piano bench, and I proceeded to pour water down his sock.
Oh, no. Oh, my God.
But as absolutely gracious as he was, he kind of like rubbed my head, and he goes, "Hey, kid, I like you. Come see me in Vegas sometime." And you know what? I believed him. And I actually tried to see if I could afford a ticket to go hang out, with the Rat Pack and everybody else. And that wasn't going to work out.
Oh, my gosh, that is awesome.
But then there were other times that were, I called Mrs. Nixon I mistook her for a maid one day, and I almost got fired. And Mrs. Nixon bailed me out, and other things. But then there were the things that were, that would make you catch your breath. One was a conversation that I would like to say I had with President Nixon. It was more like I was the only thing with a pulse around him, and I think he wanted to talk. And we talked about Teddy Roosevelt. And there were, and this is how Watergate was going on, and the issues of what happened the night before he resigned. And I was on the periphery of all of these things just because I was
wow, that is
a kid,
awesome.
and I could get around. So
it
was a great, wonderful experience.
I have a personal question. I remember those years for myself, so I don't know if this is something you relate to, but did you have a workplace romance?
No.
No.
Now, I'll tell you what I tried to do, though. I went on to become in the marketing side of the newspaper industry, and so I've been in sales most of my life. And I started out kind of then using my White House pass, which was, the security was a lot different in those days, much easier. And I would try to bring dates in to show them the Oval Office. That was remember the old thing about come see my etchings?
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, it never worked out.
No.
It never worked out well. Most of the young ladies were very nice. They thanked me for that wonderful experience, and then I never saw them again.
That's kind of funny.
I like the story about the food. I mean, the night that you had were able to take some of the roast home with you, but everything that led up to that was how everything is categorized, and everybody knows just how much food is where. It was fascinating.
Yeah, that is one of the most fascinating things to watch, and I'd recommend any book, from some of the White House chefs who talk about that. But the first family paid for their own food, and so everything had to be accounted for. I was lucky enough because the chef and his wife were so nice, and they took pity on this. I was broke. I was a broke nobody college kid. Is that they would, they'd give me some food from time to time, and I could get some leftovers from state dinners, cookies and things like that. And I was just like any other kid. I was hungry all the time. But I was eating steamship round. Taking that on the bus.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question to ask you. Did you know Stuart Stevens?
No, I may have. It doesn't ring a bell.
Well, middle name is Calvin.
His middle name is Calvin?
Calvin, yeah.
We had him on the air because he also worked in the White House, and I believe he was there at the same time as you. Mm-hmm. And he was the guy, now, as soon as I say this, you might remember him. He was the guy who cleaned the chandeliers.
Oh, sure. I've seen his book. No, I'm sure that we ran across one another because I knew, tons of folks that were in the House staff, including Mr. Allen, Eugene Allen, who Oprah made a movie called The Butler. about him,
okay.
although it has nothing to do with Mr. Allen's life. It just, the only similarity was that between the character and Mr. Allen was that they were both African American White House butlers. But he, and I have to say that those, you talk about class acts. Those guys were not only extraordinarily efficient and professional, but they were also extremely kind and nice.
It sounds like you have good memories of it, though. It sounds like fun.
I do.
Memories. It sounds like something you're sharing with us. That's fun. For those just tuning in, the book is called Downstairs at the White House, a story of a teenager, an Oval Office, and a ringside seat to Watergate. Donald M. Stinson is our guest, and he wrote the book and worked. How many years did you actually work in the executive office, you said? Is it now the Eisenhower office or something?
Yes. Well, between the old executive office building and the White House proper, I was there for almost 2 years. Then I finally had to go and earn more money doing something else. But
so it didn't pay well, huh?
No, I to me at 17, I was making I think $2.90 an hour, which that was pretty good back in those days. And you know, I mean, it was 45 years ago. But as my needs increased, that didn't exactly cut it. So
Right.
it was time to move on.
You had told us that you and your friends, you wrote in the book that when you and your friends would take tests, you would do negative thinking, taking the test.
Right.
Why did you do that?
Yeah, I don't know. That was just we had this thing that if we went into any exam or whatever and said, I'm going to flunk this, and then take it and then assume I actually flunked it, then anything less than an F was gravy. So it's one of those weird ways of looking at things, and one of my favorite part that I really enjoyed writing about was my experiences in college and some of the characters who were there that I think folks will like, including the guy who used to walk around on ice and snow with bare feet. Actually, he was almost half naked. So a lot of interesting. For a couple of years, I lived a circus every day. It was very interesting.
Did you ever have an opinion about what was going on in the country that you thought, let me just tell the president, maybe he can fix it, like the gasoline prices, for example, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I certainly remember that crisis very well. No, I was at least wise enough to stay away from giving advice. But I will tell you, if we have enough time, this one story about President Nixon. What I used to do is I used to go in through the West Wing in the morning, actually carrying a briefcase that no one ever checked. That's what security was like in those days.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I would often walk right past the President of the United States with this briefcase. And but one day, it had my schoolwork in it. And what I would do is I would go in through the West Wing, I would cross through the colonnade and the Rose Garden, and then walk through the residence, and then on my way to the East Wing, where I was in this little cubby hole down in the basement. And this one morning, I didn't have the briefcase, I had a book, and the book had something to do with Teddy Roosevelt. And the president, he stopped me, and he asked me what I was doing. This is what I was mentioning a moment ago, that I think that it wasn't really a conversation. He just wanted to talk, and I had a pulse. But he went on for a number of minutes. I don't know how long it was, talking about Teddy Roosevelt. And then that went into a conversation about Winston Churchill. I mean, it could have been 10 or 15 minutes. I really don't know. I had to sit down afterwards. My knees were shaking.
Yeah.
But it left me with an impression. And, good, bad, however you view Nixon, and many of the bad things that went on. He was a brilliant man. And I say this, I've had the pleasure of meeting most presidents since that time. And I have never felt the kind of voltage that I felt being around Richard Nixon. And maybe that was because of my age, but it may have also been because he was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And
what an amazing memory actually to have, that you spent that much time, chatting with the president, any president. That's history right there.
I don't know if I actually said anything back, but I listened intently, and I do have to make this because I've got a lot of stuff in there that is very poignant. I mean, I sat with Vice President Agnew after he had resigned. I ended up sitting on the floor next to Bob Hope's nephew. I mean, it was all weird.
Wow.
And Agnew talking about the fact that he had never wanted to be president. And lots of different things. And these people are not the cardboard cutouts that we think. I mean, they're human beings.
Right.
And,
Sure.
one of my favorites was about President Ford. After they came into office, they threw at their own expense a picnic for the whole staff, sort of a let's get to know you kind of thing. And I came late. And I was heading out through a door that's near in the East Wing, going out to the South Lawn, and the president was coming back in, and he stopped and he said, tell me about yourself and all that. And so he looked at me and he said, so how do you like being a messenger or whatever I was doing? And I said, Mr. President, just fine. I mean, it's a great job. I'm in college and all that. And what did I do? I turned to him and said, so how do you like being president? And he said, not a bad job. And then we went off in our appropriate ways. He went off to run, the most powerful nation on earth, and I went to look for potato salad. So, it was just all.
Oh my gosh!
But I was there the night that he gave his resignation. Nixon gave his resignation. In fact, I helped move furniture out of the Oval Office, and there's a lot of stories about that are very poignant. Actually, it's not all funny.
That was very profound for you. But speaking to you is very profound for me. I have a specific question, and I always wanted to know the answer to this, and you're the only person I've ever spoken to who might know the answer. My grandmother got a birthday card from Jimmy Carter. Did he really send that, or did one of you guys send that and sign his name to it? Well, how does that work?
What answer would you like? Actually, those were all pre-printed. And they were mailed out, and there were, I'd get assigned to different things. That was a job I had,
So that came from
somebody
you.
Would send me over.
So you
could, well, not under Carter, but yeah, I mean, you got too many. There's just too much that goes out that it has to be kind of automated.
Funny. That's funny. I always suspected that. Anyway.
Why did you try to make it one of your missions in life to establish a free press?
What had happened, I was on the marketing side of the newspaper business, and the Bush administration, Bush 41, after the wall fell and the Soviet Union dispersed, there was an idea of sending media executives to the former Soviet Union to try to help them develop a free press, which a great difficulty because particularly in Russia, there was no economy to build it on, still isn't, and but it was a fascinating experience, and we actually I joke about a lot of the things, but they were true. I mean, I did wrestle with a goat on Aeroflot. There was a guy that died on one of the flights. I mean, it was all weird in my Forrest Gump life, but we did accomplish some things at least for a while until things fell apart again in Russia. And hopefully one of these days they will have the ability to have a free press. One of the funny things is that all they did is that when after the wall came down and Yeltsin was president, all they did, pretty much the leadership, was transition for, if you were the head of the Communist Party in an oblast, which is like a state, then you just became the governor of the state. And the same people doing pretty much the same things, they just changed their names. And but it is a dreary, horrific place, still is. And I have a lot of friends that I have unfortunately lost communication with, and I think that's due to their government.
Oh my!
Sharing your stories is such a gift to us. Thank you for doing that. I have a copy of Downstairs at the White House. If you would like the copy that was sent to me, please call me at 622-9622. I can only give one away, so I'll only answer one call, and then the rest of us will have to go buy it. I did find it on Amazon. And do you have a website dedicated to the book?
Yes, downstairs at thewhitehouse.com. And you could get it at Barnes & Noble in paperback, on Amazon in both paperback, and you can get it in Kindle, the e-edition. You can read on your computer for just $5.99.
Not bad. Let me give this one away. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
Yes, my name's Marsha Cuddy.
Marsha. Do you know where we are?
I believe so.
We're in the Paddock Mall, just outside the food court.
That's where I believe you are. Okay, I'll be there in about an hour.
You got it. It'll be waiting for you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Donald,
Hey, great.
Donald, I think you got a hit on your hands. Thank you for being on the show with us today. That was fun.
The pleasure is all mine. You guys are absolutely wonderful. This has been a blast. Thank you.
This is WOCA Ocala.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. Peter struck the FBI agent who came